Hi, I'm Alan Franey, one of the programmers at VIFF, and for today's episode, we'll be speaking with Sissel Dargis, who's here with a marvelous film called Balomania, which is about the whole culture, secret underground culture in a way, of people who create these wonderful, large, hot air balloons and set them up into the skies above Sao Paulo, Rio, and Sissel has really entered that culture and opened our eyes to something we would never otherwise experience. Welcome to the VIFF Podcast. This is your chance to get the inside track from the people behind the films you love and the films you are yet to discover. This podcast was recorded on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples. Recorded during the 43rd edition of the Vancouver International Film Festival, these conversations take us behind the scenes with the creators bringing their work to the big screen. I'm Alan Franey, and we'll be here in conversation with Sissel Dargis, who's visiting us from Copenhagen and on her way to Brazil eventually to present the film she's made there called Balomania. Okay, so to describe this film before we get into it, it is a documentary about people who create these marvelous and huge hot air balloons. And they are not just hobbyists, they are dedicated to this. It's a big part of their life. And you spent a good amount of time with them there, Sissel. So can you maybe just start by telling us how you got into this?
Hello, good afternoon. So I was living in Brazil. I was 19 and I was painting graffiti, like that was my thing. Um, and one day just I was told about these baloeiros, and I was told about them from these graffiti painters that were already really like badass, they were like the ones that climbed these skyscrapers, and they were like, shit, have you not heard about the balloon men? They're like next level. So for me it was like really curious even to imagine that this secret world existed on top of our heads. So as someone who was like encountering art for the first time kind of through graffiti, for me it was like, man, I wanna do that as well. I wanna see what I can, like, can I take it to the sky as well?
And how long did it take to make the film?
10 years.
10 years. Why so long?
Because I like came from nothing, and it takes kind of a long time to try and like get into the industry. I'd be honest, and like that's the part that took the longest.
So were you traveling back and forth between Denmark and Brazil during those 10 years?
I also went to film school in Cuba for 3 years, and yeah, I also made a video game in the meantime. So I was just kind of like trying to wing it, like
Yeah.
until it was done.
So, for people who haven't seen the film, it's important to say that it is a fabulous looking film. You know, it really takes advantage of the big screen. Without being an expensive film, it's so visually interesting, and you have the support of uh, some Danish companies. How were you able to finance it and be able to work on it for so long?
Well, you have to think the first like 5 years that I would count as making the film, I just had a camera. It wasn't like I knew anyone. So then once I got into film school, most of the film is filmed before film school. And then, like, getting into film school, you started to realize that I needed money to make a real film, right? Um, but in the Cuban film school, you learn a lot about film and filmmaking. However, you are like in a parallel society where money just works differently. So the whole, like, even understanding how you could fund a documentary, that was very like on a street hustle level, you just learn to negotiate eggs for extras. And so when I was done with film school in Cuba, I just started chasing whatever I could get across to get money to fund like a real production. And by that I meant mostly just being able to work with good editors and good sound engineers, and all of that costs a lot of money. You can do so like yourself a good part, but I think you hit a wall. Also, when you start learning about film and you know what kind of film you want to make, but impossible, you can't also be a good editor, a good sound engineer, a good color corrector, and all of that. So
Yeah. Well, an important dimension of this film is that you were able to get into a world that is not just little known outside of Brazil, but people who live in Sao Paulo or Rio know about this phenomenon because you can't miss these balloons in the air when they're there. But it's an impenetrable world to the extent that it is done a little bit secretively, right? Because it is technically illegal. They're breaking the law by launching these balloons. Can you explain a bit about that part of it?
So it's not just a little secretive. It's very secretive, right? And it's perhaps absurd for people outside of Brazil, and like here we can look at it as something like, whoa, they create these incredible balloons, but they're very, very persecuted in Brazil. And people will have the police invading their houses in the middle of the night. There's always like a bounty on balloon men, so there's a serious witch hunt going on. And so obviously they're very like paranoid to who they let in, which is also why I believe that there is not a lot of other stuff about it. It's because it actually to survive, it had to be very, very closed.
Mm-hmm. So there's the question about how you as a filmmaker gained access. But before that, I think it's important to say that the film allows us to experience a different side of humanity, not just of Brazil, not just to sort of penetrate into the favelas and places that not many tourists go to, but you really open up these people's lived experience for us. And I think an audience member goes on a journey into meeting certain individuals that you come to appreciate and understand in ways that you weren't expecting to necessarily. That it's a very humane film in many ways. So for you to be trusted by these people, how long a process was it of building that trust and then them getting to know you?
It was Well, first of all, I didn't gain the trust as a filmmaker. You know, I came in as a graffiti painter that was recommended by someone who had a cousin who was in one of these gangs. And it's very like, in a way, it's very hierarchical. Like, it's not like graffiti in that sense, because these crews, they always have a head, and that head is like a godfather. It's like an older person. You know, you don't, like in graffiti, you don't have that as much. Like, this was very old school, and and they have to authorize everything that, like, every step someone takes into that world. They are the ones that, like, managed this culture before it got illegal, and the ones that, like, taught the younger ones how to do it, etc. So very fast I was kind of like sent to different heads of different crews that would then question me, you know, test me. And that was like a game in itself, you know. I wouldn't do that today, but back then I was like, and they're really, they will test you far, because it's also a lot about, like, as in the film, like, how far are you willing to go for this? So, for example, the first one after this, because if you want to, like, try and talk with them, that nobody wants to talk with you, you know, you have to come recommended. But even recommended, you can maybe wait 1 month for a call. You know, you just wait. They will call you. And then this guy calls me up. He was called Balloon Johnny, Johnny the Balloon. And he's like, so I heard you like balloons. Do you want to fly? Are you ready? Like, do you want to fly? And I'm like, is this like a trick questions? I knew. So this is also an important thing to mention for those who haven't seen it. It's like, these balloons don't carry human beings, right? They're just flying pieces of art, sometimes with a lot of fireworks or candles, whatever. But there is a parallel to these other balloons that carry people, because those are the legal balloons, and there's an economy behind that. And the other one, it's like underground, right? So there's no real economy. And sometimes balloon men that operate in the underground, well, they will go and make money in the legal world and fly these more expensive balloons and then put it into their illegal balloons. Um, Anyways, and this Johnny the Ballon, he was like, can you meet me in the highway in between Rio and Sao Paulo, 4 a.m., like in 2 days? And you have to come alone. And I did it, you know. So I was there in this gas station, and the exact midpoint in between Rio and Sao Paulo is 3 hours each way. And then this like Hummer pulls up with like a huge balloon in the back. And it was strange, you know, and it wasn't comfortable, and it was really weird at times as well. But I think they also saw, like, all the time that I wasn't afraid, so that already made them a little bit like, okay, maybe there is something about it. But then they would also think I was a cop sometimes, right? So that was the biggest thing I had to convince them about, was like, whose side was I on? And probably that was the trickiest part, and the one that I was also mostly scared.
It's, I think, worth saying that, we've seen representations of, big city life in Brazil, particularly Sao Paulo and Rio, the favelas and so on, often in sort of violent terms, gang warfare, the police, the sort of military aspect of the police there, City of God, this kind of thing. And your film's not like that. Your film is really a celebration of an art form and a passion. And there's a gentleness to it in many respects, which is quite winning. You really feel for these people, and it gives you a way of understanding what their lives are. I remember one line in the film really struck me. It was sort of this question of, why are you doing this? And someone says, reality is demotivating. Which is so poignant at the time that line's delivered, because you see what's in it for these people. It's a way for them to find a transcendence, if you want. It's like a literal transcendence. These balloons go up, and they're such incredible works of art. They've put how many countless hours go into making some of these balloons. Can you describe, the moment where you sort of realized that and what that was like to actually see the craft involved?
I think it was like gradually, it was, first of all, I think I didn't expect there to be any sense of transcendence, because I came from graffiti, and that was mostly just like, and a bit of adrenaline, and okay, sometimes you can be better or worse. But when I was part of making the first balloon I released as well, it was strange to feel, first of all, that you could make something fly. And there is something about like spending time doing something concrete and releasing that. It's, in a way, it's it's not surprising that something so ritualistic has also transcended throughout so thousands of years across the globe, right? It's not a new thing. Graffiti is a new thing, in a way, newer, I'd say. But so there was something very like ancient that was woken up in me that I didn't expect. And for a moment, I think I was also really like touched by the sense of collectivity, because you can't release a balloon alone. You can, but it's like a small one, and a bigger one, you have to be more people, you have to be in symphony, and that's beautiful, because you're kind of like connecting on another level, and you have to have like deep focus. There is this moment where everybody's kind of like breathing in the same like pace, so you can make it fly. And the bigger, the harder it is, right? But also the bigger the sense of release.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, I think also in today, and as well as back then, 10 years ago, like we search for these experiences, and especially young people. I think like if you seek it through religion. Sometimes a lot of people, like, we're not really into the religious structures of that specific transcendent experience, right? So in a way, these balloons was a really simple way of like praying or being mindful, if you want to put it like that, for people that would not necessarily go on a mindfulness retreat. Or, you know what I mean? It was just a natural space. And that impacted me a lot, and I thought a lot about friends from my neighborhood that I think could do really well with a bit of that in their daily lives,
Mm-hmm.
And it's also why a lot of baloeiros say that it's therapy. Balloons is their therapy. because you go every day, you glue together paper, you're in silence, sometimes with others, but mostly in you focus. It's a focused experience. And then in the end, 4 years later, you've put all this life into it, and then you see the thing go up or not, but becomes also these like personal milestones in what you as a human being are able to create. And if you are in the bottom of society and you don't have a lot of ladders you can climb on to even like other milestones that other people would have, no, I'm gonna get a house, or I'm gonna this or that, well, you created a balloon the size of a skyscraper, and you made it fly, and everybody knows, and you went into history, but maybe you are parking cars during the day.
It combines some of what we might think of with extreme sports, but also some of what we might think of the most painstaking, laborious craft, right? And these people are artists. The way they make these as beautiful as possible, right? And there's so much risk and work involved. And I suppose that occasionally it fails. Like someone might work on something for months, and then did you see much of that? We don't see it a lot in the film, but did you experience that yourself where it just didn't work?
Yeah. I mean, we see one balloon that catches fire.
Yeah.
And I experienced it a few times, but mostly it's the better the balloon crew is, the less it happens, right? You learn from your mistakes. But sometimes also because it's illegal, you skip details, right? Or you will release it even if there is a wind, because it was so hard just to transport it in 3 different trucks and rent a piece of land to release it. And then it may not be the right circumstances, but we're gonna try anyways because we're so pressured to do it. And that's when accidents happen, because you shouldn't release it even when there's like a little wind, for example. And I have seen that, but I think the most heartbreaking is like when I've seen baloeiros get their balloons like confiscated, and
by the authorities.
And the authorities, they set fire to them. First, they will try and negotiate because it also moves a lot of money. These balloons, they know these balloons are expensive. So once they confiscate it, they'll put a price for the recovery of it. And then the baloeiros can be like, if they have money to get it back or not. Otherwise, the police just sets fire to it. And that's crazy.
Yeah. I can imagine you'd see these grown men weep. I would imagine, it's you can see the personal investment. It's like they're children, right? It's pretty amazing to see these people so deeply invested in something, and then to see the cooperation that's required. And I wonder whether in the way this is like a sport, if you sense that there was a spirit of competition that extends to being really competitive, or whether it's competition that's fairly camaraderie because of, how kind of particular it is.
That's a very good question. It's both. Just like you will have people that are very competitive in football and others that just like the sport and to play together, right? And in the balloon world, you have like the balloon Oscars, right? That by in itself creates a competition because everybody wants to win the balloon of the year. Like this kind of stuff means something. They have a system of valuing good balloons or not. And just like filmmakers or any other artists, you know, it means something to get the recognition within the community. Um, and also with the sport aspect, I think this particular culture is curious because it has a part of it that is the racing, right? After the balloon. And this is really like a sport. You have to get to the balloon's landing spot.
And these balloons can travel great distances.
Distances. They can
We're
cross
talking about,
states. They can
yeah.
go to the sea. There was one balloon that landed in Paraguay, you know, and it's there. There is a lot of like, who are the best balloon chasers, you know, how far did this crew go, how many cities did they cross, how many days were they on the road, how intact is the balloon when they get it. And this is really like a game, you know. And again, it's about like, okay, this very excellent crew released a balloon, and then depending on the balloon, there's more or less people after it as well.
So let's imagine that the criteria for judging how good a balloon is partly size. And what was the biggest one you saw?
The biggest one I saw was 43 meters.
43 meters across.
Tall.
Top to bottom.
Yeah. But there is always something attached that is sometimes 100 meters or 70 meters, you know, the flags or the lights. But the size is not actually judged so much in these circles, because everybody knows that the size is also what kind of like fucks with the culture. You know, it's like you can't, it's just more dangerous the bigger it is. And the people that are juries or that guard this culture, like Sergio, everybody that feels kind of responsible and cares about the culture's future existence, they're not in favor of giants, you know. So the categories and the way these balloons are judged is then more on how well are they manufactured, how precise is the gluing, how complex is the mosaic that creates the design, how well did the release go, how much in symphony was the people, how far did it fly, how safe was it, you know. And in a way, these are also the things that if you did make it legal, you can foster a structure like that where people will then really make an effort to follow these criteria because they want to win. They want to be the best. The Giants is more like, it's like I'd say almost like a macho thing within the community that like, release the bigger.
Yours is bigger, but mine is more beautiful.
Yeah, that's when you like mature a bit, you know? So people have a phase where they're like, we'll love giants, and then they'll go down in size.
Interesting. Well, let's just talk about the illegality for a moment. So I know that there's obviously the risk of fire. So the fire, let's say things go wrong, you could have a fire that started in an area where there are buildings, so buildings could catch on fire, or if it drops, if it happens to set the forester on fire, that's a clear reason why the authorities might be concerned about the rampant rise of ballooning as a subculture. But in your own estimation, how much of this is a real threat and how much is it more for the sake of control and to do with class politics in Brazil?
Such a good question, Alan. Um, I think there is a real danger. But I also, again, stand by the fact that it is more dangerous when it is forced to operate in illegality, in the margins, because then there is no one to regulate it, no one to be responsible for it, and then everybody just does whatever. If you look at Mexico and Colombia, they have a balloon culture as well. And in Mexico, it's full on legal, but it's they have festivals, balloon festivals, where people come with their balloons, they represent their tribe or their crew. There's like many indigenous tribes that do balloons. They have each their style, and the Ministry of Culture also supports these festivals, and the festivals only happen in rain season, so the ground is always wet, and that therefore there is like much less risk. The firemen are always ready, they are at these events, and it creates a lot of uh, money for the villages that host these festivals, right? I think that's a good option. It's a good way to do it. It's a good way to maintain also this like cultural heritage, which is incredible, and very surprising that so few people know about it, because it really is. I showed you some of these Mexican balloons yesterday. They're also insane. In Colombia, it's like a gray zone. It's illegal, but they will sometimes make exceptions, some determined weekends for people to just release. And and I think that works as well. It works much better. Now in Brazil, it's hard to answer why it specifically got so criminalized there. And in a way, it you can say that in Mexico and Colombia, it's associated much more to, for example, indigenous like celebrations and all of that. So it doesn't have this like cartel connotations, right? And when I say that, I mean that in Brazil, in Sao Paulo and Rio, it's very much in the outskirts and in favelas that people do this. That doesn't mean that they are associated to the organized crime as we know it, but they were just born there. However, it's very easy to make an assumption or associate them directly with the gangs that are then trafficking and all of that. And I think that's what hurts them the most, because then it's easier for the police, first of all, and for the media to create uh materials and news where it's like we're like going for these people. We're not going after the real war. We're going after something that is a menace to us all. It is terrorism, you know but it's more exciting to look at than the same old news about school kids getting shot by cops on their way to school because maybe they are drug dealers. You know what I mean? um Again, this is not I'm saying this as a subjective person, is not like clear facts. But you can like question yourself, and why do they spend so much money chasing it? Why is there every weekend like 3 helicopters ready, 4 police cars on the ground, a huge like intelligence service that is like trying to track down balloon men, and media news? Like, why? That's a lot of money you could spend on just creating a balloon festival and like making a structure for it.
And the corollary of that, in a way, is the bravery of these men, because they make themselves marks in launching this. That must be part of the thrill to a certain extent for some, but you don't see that in the film so much. You don't get a sense of bravura with these men, that they're wanting to do something illegal. It's more that they're just wanting to be left alone so they can fly their balloons. And they've just become enthusiasts of a sport in the same way people might fly airplanes, paper airplanes, or to create anything, right? They put so much effort into making these things because they believe in their beauty. It's pretty remarkable. Now, about the filmmaking itself, I think that, the question you ask yourself from the beginning is, what are we seeing? You have to really work. It's not a film that explains everything tidily at the beginning. You're immersed in this culture, and then the questions come to you, and you have lots and lots of questions as you watch the film. One of them being, who made this film, and how were they able to be here? And you made a decision not to show yourself in the beginning. So what was the thought process for structuring it, and the delay in showing yourself?
Well, I never thought of myself as a character. When I was filming, like I said, it was almost like home video style, right? I was just filming what I was living, and it was always like, it was too subjective, I realized, to be observational, because I would interact, they would interact with me, they're always like, but I never filmed myself. And it was also, I feel like, thank God, this was before like the massive selfie epidemic, like I was just not used to filming myself, or that was not the focus, But as we started editing, I realized that nobody could follow what's going on, and people were like, who is this person, So I tried to find if I had like even just a few images of myself in some rear windows, and there was so little. There was only my birthday, which is then later on, and I think that was fine. Like I think it's good because it's not the focus, and I don't know how I would have felt if I had been more visible. I think I was already such a strange element there. Then having to see me there, it was just gonna be, it was too much blonde hair in the middle of this like thing going on. Sorry about that. So yeah.
I think it makes the film, adds a dimension to the film that makes it interesting. In the series of questions one has as you're trying to put it together in your own mind, because if you'd shown yourself from the beginning, I mean, you're in Brazil, you're amidst Brazilian men, and here you are, you speak Portuguese beautifully, but you can see that you're Danish, so they encountered you as the other from the beginning, despite the fact that you speak Portuguese so naturally. So there's this interesting chemistry there of the male, female, the European, the Brazilian, the blonde, and the dark, and this is part of the magic of the film, but you keep that secreted away until it makes sense. I thought it was really well done.
I think also I really wanted people to experience it like they were there. you know. And I think you just, I mean, there's a lot of pros by showing your face immediately. Perhaps you can make some people connect easier because you are a visible character, you know. But I think it's, the other thing is a little bit more challenging, but I think it's stronger because if you manage to do it, because then it's you, Alan, there, you know, you are the one looking them in the eyes. Yeah.
But you're sort of saying that you didn't know that you would be such a regular presence narrating until
Yeah,
you
no.
had to structure the film and
Yeah,
provide the glue for this mosaic, so to speak.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a big no-go, right? For a lot of, it was a process as well, because it's the biggest no-go in film schools, right? Voiceovers, narrating, and especially when it comes as a realization later, it's kind of like you fell into the trap, didn't you? And it took me a while to first of all neutralize it and be like, you know what, I'm gonna befriend this voiceover concept. No, I'm not too pretentious to not want to give it a try, you know. A lot of people would be like, no, we're gonna make it a really weird abstract storytelling, and maybe it would have become another film that would reach a different audience. Maybe it would have been more art house, more um you know, a jury film in that sense. But when I would send out different tests to friends and friends in favelas and whatnot, you know, I realized that the most important was that people that I were like me, or people that I liked, understood it and were just like, why give it so much thought? Just like, tell us what you're thinking, you know. And so that was really interesting, and it made me get really into actually like singing, and kind of like studying also, like, okay, who are the Brazilian rappers whose flow I like, you know, because I'm good at Portuguese, I'm fluent, but I don't have like a flow, you know. I still speak like, I don't know, but and that was a very interesting journey to also talk, learn, find a way you wanted to talk. I don't think I nailed it, but I liked the experience.
It works beautifully. So we have a question in this popcorn box, like a fortune cookie question. But I want to ask you about the life of the film, because it's at an interesting moment, right? So you worked on it for years, but it's pretty brand new. So tell us where the world premiere is, and then there's Vancouver, and then what's happening in Brazil.
Okay, like the places I went
Yeah,
with
so
it?
it's you
Okay.
started.
I started in home, ground zero, Copenhagen.
That's where the first screening of it
Yeah,
was?
yeah.
Okay. And what
And
was the event? This was a public screening.
CPH Docs.
CPH Docs, which
Yeah.
is one of the world's most important documentary festivals. And that was how long ago?
That was in March.
In March.
And I don't know if but it was the first documentary festival I also went to, and the parties that I used to crash when I was a teenager I could never get into. So I
you got
felt
your
like
revenge.
victorious with all my friends and their little accreditations, and we were like, we made it, you know. And from there I went to Switzerland, to Vision de Réel, which was a completely different audience, Switzerland, you know.
What did the repressed Swiss think of Balomania?
You know, it's interesting because it's kind of like, and I hope it doesn't sound pretentious, but this film is a little bit like Fight Club, you know, without the fighting. So it was funny that in the projections of this film, the projectionists and the sound engineers and the staffs or volunteers or securities, they are the ones that really come up to me afterwards, and they're like, you made me think of my cousin and blah. And then the jury is like, I like a bit like, it's a little too handheld, or you know what I mean, or the narrative is confusing or whatnot. And that has also been a journey kind of to accept who are the people that connect with this film. You know, they're my people, you know, and I love that it can be a catalyst for connecting, you know. But so yeah, that was probably the stiffest audience in Switzerland. Like, people were nice and clapped, but it's very, you know. And then
So I'm not sure I approve of this.
yeah, it's like, oh, but why do they do it? You know, why? Then I went to Docs Barcelona. That was really cool. And also, I'm Spanish as well. I know you introduced me as Danish, but so I had like my cousins and my family, and that was very, like, you can really feel also kind of what the people of that specific country is like, how they react to the film. You know, some people will have references where they themselves have done something similar, or their parents do, or even something like understanding the subtleties of pain or darkness. You know, some, like a Swiss audience, they don't understand it the same way. They need to see an AK-47 and like a hungry child to understand poverty, because it's so far from their reality. But when I showed it in Serbia or Macedonia, people would come out crying, like older women, and because they don't need to see it. They feel it just in the look in the character's eyes, you know. And that has been very beautiful to experience as well, you know. For some people, it just awakens something where they're maybe in a hamster wheel of like productive society, making money, and maybe they have some little dream they once gave up in the rear window, but rear mirror. But and then they see the film and they wake up a little. But others, they will really feel it from the like wound that these balloons also come from, right? So yeah, Barcelona. Then I went to Australia, had a quick stop in Cannes because we received a nomination. So not a screening, but a nomination, and that was cool. Sydney was crazy, that it was like on the bottom of the world, and there was even a balloon girl there who was the daughter of a balloon man I had once met, and we released a balloon in Sydney. And then I went to Iceland as well, and Greece. Yeah, and then so a bit of the Balkans, Macedonia, Serbia, Latvia, and then Brazil is coming up.
So Brazil is coming up. It still has. You told me that one of the characters had seen it, but most of them will be seeing this for the first time, the subjects of the film.
No, there's two that hasn't seen it.
Two who haven't.
Yeah.
So the others were able to see it at one of the previous screenings. So
yeah.
Presumably a few of them came to CPH Docs. Right. Okay. And the screening in Brazil will be, are you expecting it to get a wide audience there? Will it have to stay sort of underground?
Man, I don't even know what to expect. I have no idea. I know we have 25,000 followers on Instagram. Most of them are Brazilian balloon men in these regions that are like, for a year, they're like, when is it coming out? And it's also gonna be curious because I never really showed my face, you know, and on this profile, they think I'm a guy. So in a way, it's everything is there's gonna be a before and after with everything, you know. Also, I don't know how it's gonna be with the police. Are they gonna then start looking into the social media, who's following? I feel like I need to learn so much about even the political setup of this around it that I didn't expect. Like, I guess I always knew we were working towards that because we want the film to make a difference. But I hadn't thought that, man, I need to now like train with lawyers and know my rights and paragraphs and be ready for the media there and all the criticism that can arise. Be able to speak their case as well, and that they can speak also their case without getting in trouble.
And you said at one of the screenings that you already know, you've had good legal advice that these people are protected. Their presence in the film doesn't put them at legal risk because of the duration of time.
Yeah.
So when is the screening? When do you go to Brazil?
So because it's Brazil, they have not confirmed the screening date yet. They've just said it will be in between the 17th of October and 22nd. So in São Paulo. So I'm just like ready. And I go to Rio next week and like start preparing and doing my push-ups like a taxi driver.
Do you have to fly back from Vancouver to Copenhagen and then go to Brazil?
No. I go straight.
Okay, good.
Straight, which is like 10 hours and then 10 hours.
Yes. Okay, good. So I have one surprise question. Let's hope it's a good one. If you had to have one film director's style influence your life, whose would it be?
Influence my life. Wow. What a question. Because, the director's styles that I like, I'm not sure I would want that life, because I was gonna say Scorsese, but I don't want to like get in trouble in that way, I don't know. That's such a good question. It would have to be like a happy ending, at least.
For a question like that, I don't think there needs to be an answer. Probably just a list that you wouldn't want it to be.
Yeah. That is so tough.
Interesting to think about for us all. Who would we want?
Who would you want?
Well, I immediately think of directors whose work I like that I would not want to inhabit that universe. Tarkovsky, say.
Yeah. No, you don't want to live Stalker. Like, that was...
No. Yeah. Maybe, I don't know, some... who's our favorite American comedy filmmaker? So to have a happy life with constant laughter might be the best choice.
Yes, and maybe some music.
Yes.
Like, the Buena Vista Social Club film.
There you go.
Something like chill vibe.
There you go. That's a good one. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Thanks for being in Vancouver, and thank you for your film.
And thank you for the invitation to be here talking with you.
You have been listening to the VIFF Podcast. Thanks to our community broadcast partner, Tell Us Story Hive, for their support. If you're enjoying the show, please rate and review the podcast, and be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Visit viff.org to learn more about the Vancouver International Film Festival and see what's on at the VIFF Center year-round.